welcome everybody to the third KZG-Ceremony call. This is a call where we are discussing the KZG-Ceremony for preparing the way for proto-dank sharding and future scaling of Ethereum. So hopefully you're in the right place if you're attending this call. This is a bi-weekly call, meaning every 2 weeks for updates and general progress from the people who are working on it. Specifically, I've been working with Carl on sort of organizing the approach, getting people to work on things ahead of time. We want to get this done by the end of the year, kicked off before the end of the year. That includes a bunch of things. So we're going to go through what those specific things are. If you have any questions, I guess people can jump in and ask them in the chat or wherever they'd like to ask them. So the first thing that's, I think, new from this week is the timeline. And I'll share it in the chat. Carl, do you want to talk about that? And we met with Mehdi yesterday to go over this and a couple of things.
Yeah, so this is basically what I was presenting last week. I don't know if Trent shared the link. But yeah, basically last week I mentioned some timelines of roughly where I'd like things to happen. And this is just sort of that explained out in visual and written form. Yeah, hopefully that's just for everyone to sort of agree on and or complain about / contribute to whatever based on what you think is and isn't reasonable on there. The audits are of course sort of fixed dates on this, so that's the one limitation we have on these things. But yeah, that's pretty much what we have there.
I saw you unmute, Jeff. Did you want to jump in?
No, just checking my microphone.
Oh, okay. All right, no worries.
Yeah.
Just wanted to check, yeah. The other thing, or I guess next on the agenda is website interface. So we want to start getting the Ethereum.org team to allocate some of their time, their resources towards this as well, if we're going to have them do an interface. Jeff, I know you've worked on some of these in the past. Is there any standard things that somebody implementing the website would need to know about, or is this sort of, you approach it in a situational ad hoc basis? Each project is different. I'm curious your thoughts, because I want to start putting something together that they can look at and know what to expect.
Oh yeah, so it's pretty bog standard website. I thought when we were talking about Ethereum.org, we were talking about a website that would display the history and the results, rather than the website that actually serves the interface. So are we talking about both?
Oh, in my mind, it was the website serving the interface where people participate from. But I guess we would need both. Were you imagining that somebody else would take care of the actual contribution interface, or is that something you were thinking of doing?
The user interface stuff, what we normally do with that is we put up the hosting for the for all of that, and then host it on a subdomain of the project that's running it. So in that case, it could be like kzg.ethereum.org or whatever we choose, and then it's just it's directed to our servers. There's quite a bit of setup in servers, yeah. Especially at the moment, we've got Google Firebase, and it's fairly complicated. Like, it's easier to to leave it where it is and just redirect.
I think what was more the question here was like who's doing the dev on the site itself, but it sounds like the idea here would be then that you're doing that. Am I correct?
Oh yeah, yes.
Okay.
The dev work, yeah. We're assembling a team, so I'll have a few helpers in the coming weeks to do that kind of thing.
Okay. Cool. So if you need help from the Ethereum org team, they're more than happy to help. This is a sort of kind of project that they'd be happy to do. But they are like again, it's less from the sort of like DevOps / management side and more of just actually having a code base. But that's I guess uniform or uses the sort of common ideas that they've been going through, and ideally will include some translations and that kind of thing down the line. But yeah.
Yeah, well, we see this as part of an ongoing sort of development effort for the PSE team to have trusted setups to cater for all sorts of situations, and this is one one particular situation that we can build on what we've already got, and we can build stuff that we want to carry on in the future for different kinds of setups, Plonk or phase 2 or whatever. So that's where we're coming from. That's why we're putting a team together.
Okay, cool. All right. Kev, you're talking about JS SDK. Do you mind elaborating a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm saying that does it make sense for basically, so if someone creates a Rust client and maybe a client in C++, they both convert them to WASM, and then there is a common JavaScript SDK that connects to the WASM, and then like Jeff's website could connect to the SDK, and then he knows what methods are available, and maybe the Ethereum website could connect to the SDK and they know what methods are available. So the front end sort of can be agnostic to whatever is happening.
Yeah, I really like that idea.
So that sounds like an API that sits in the middle between the like the user interface and the computation code, WASM code.
Right. Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I thought about doing that. It'd be cool in some ways, yeah.
I mean, there's really not much computation to be done outside of that SDK. So like basically the SDK would look like the specs I've written, just with defining what that interface looks like. And then you can put whatever wrapper you want around that.
Right. The only thing that would probably need to be defined somewhere is sort of these web workers. Maybe the SDK doesn't even need to worry about web workers.
I'm not familiar enough with deployed WASM blobs to comment on that, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's just a detail, so it doesn't matter for the overall idea.
Like ideally,
Yeah.
the SDK wouldn't have to be aware of this, but it might be useful to be something to have it be something that the SDK could like define. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's quite a good idea that the the SDK could have something in it to, or it could create the web workers for potentially create web workers and just hand over individual sections, and it does the job of dividing them up. I think all of this is kind of lower priority than actually getting a primary API set up.
When you say
Yeah,
primary
because-
API, you mean between the coordinator and participant?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm. Agreed. But what it would mean is if we define this SDK, then there's sort of a what it means to implement it is if you're doing a browser implementation, plug something into the SDK and sort of map that onto the API, and you're done pretty much.
Yeah, it'd be quite easy.
Yeah, which is appealing.
So is this is an additional mini project within this larger thing that we're doing? And who would be working on this? If we decide to do it.
Yeah, I guess that's in my my area. Yeah, it's kind of like a mini project. Yeah, it's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, I'm happy to help working on that, but I'm not familiar enough with web workers to make intelligent decisions on that. So yeah, definitely need someone's help.
Maybe it's possible that you don't need to define the web workers, and it's sort of the SD. It's just done implicitly. So like if you have two different SDKs, one of them could be doing it single-threadedly, as long as it exposes the right methods, I guess.
So what would be the normal way of sort of splitting this up amongst workers? Would you like chunk up the how many workers would you spin up for a job like this? Is that dependent?
You ask the hardware and it tells you how many threads it's got, and that's the number you use.
Okay.
And the normal way would be like with Rust and Rayon, it sorts it all out. So the SDK would just be handing over the whole job to it.
Okay.
But that's their approach. Other approaches, other software uses different approaches.
But it's safe to assume then that we can, like, it can be implicit.
Yeah.
And we can just leave it up to the SDK to decide.
Yep.
All right. So then it's basically just this interface is basically one function then. It's just defining how we pass this information across. That's it.
Yeah.
There's sort of one call and then whatever async stuff that comes back, and that's it.
Yes.
Okay.
Would we need to put in the OAuth stuff in the SDK, or is that?
No.
I don't.
No, that would be API
No.
side.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, it's basically just that JSON file that needs to be passed across. The transcript file. Sorry, ceremony file, I called it.
Yes, and leave it up to the WASM code to derive the entropy.
Ah, that is a good point. I think we should pass in the entropy.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a debate to be had here. Passing in the entropy, I think, would be like less secure because there's just now more places which touch the secret.
Yeah.
But that's a trade-off against things like allowing the user to keyboard smash or whatever to feed in this entropy.
Yeah.
Kev, do you have anything?
Are you suggesting that the entropy is created outside of the SDK and then you pass it in? Is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I guess that's fine. I think that's. I'd have to check on WASM's host functions because WASM is sandboxed.
Yeah.
I assume that sort of if you pass in a host function and the randomness is done inside of the WASM, it might be easier to clear all copies of it, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I think either way works.
It's easy to pass the function into WASM, and that runs JavaScript code. And it's probably just easiest to derive the actual entropy and pass it across.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise we can also just make this. We can have two options here, right? This can be sort of the two different APIs,
yeah.
or an optional thing.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I like Carl your idea better because then I believe the SDK is deterministic, so it's a bit easier to test it.
Yeah. I mean, I think in general, there's a lot of understanding to be done on how we zeroize everything on the memory side here. And I guess now the SDK is included in something we need to worry about from that perspective.
Yeah,
like, I don't know if your standard like crates or whatever for doing this, how that gets handled once it gets compiled into WASM.
There are zeroize crates, but as far as I know, you sort of don't have any strong guarantees. Sort of the compiler can do anything it wants, or it can just copy just secrets wherever it wants to. So
yeah,
just hope for the best, I guess.
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess this is also fun stuff to help that we can have a look at in the audit time to like make sure stuff that's been done around the secrets is sensible, and if not, try a different approach.
Yeah.
As a last resort.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Then let's go for now. I think we're trying to pass in the secret.
Yeah.
So one of the other options that got touched upon now was the primary API. Yeah, so I've done a fair bit more digging into some of the options, yeah, I'm still not an AMQP fan. There aren't stable implementations in many languages, like Rust included, for example. And I'm just not convinced that it's like the complexity is worth it, particularly if we can shorten contribution times down to low enough numbers.
Yeah, fair enough comment, Carl. I've been putting it together and thinking about how it would look as a pure REST API, and taking some inspiration from Marius's API.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's mapping a asynchronous process onto a synchronous call, but yeah, it does make the calls simpler,
like
themselves in the API.
I certainly agree that in some, like if we're only writing one implementation, or it was the sort of perfect world, we can achieve higher throughput by having a much nicer queuing system by using WebSockets or AMQP or whatever. But I just the simplicity of a RESTful API really appeals to me, and from this standpoint. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been putting together a draft of that API spec on that basis, and it looks like it's going to be feasible. Yeah.
Fantastic. Do you have a place you're working on that you can share either publicly or privately? So you can comment.
Yeah, sure. I'll put something in the Telegram chat probably tomorrow.
Fantastic. Thanks. Like on that, I've been thinking about like a little bit on how to make sure that like the hits we take for this queuing system aren't too bad then, based on like switching to a RESTful API. And to me, the main thing here is that the time slots for when you are going to participate become fixed. So you will register in the queue, you get some token back, but then after that, there is now a fixed point in the future, a time where you'll participate, and we can't sort of move that up or down very easily. And so I've been trying to think about like what does that mean, and how do we minimize/mitigate the downsides of that? So one idea I had is that we could allow a parameter, which is how long you request your time slot to be. So if you're going to attempt to do this single threaded, or you've written your own implementation that's got some pretty slow BLS library, then you can request a longer time slot. And then for the sort of like primary implementation that everyone's going to be using, the one Jeff's working on, we can just make that, we can set that to a more reasonable number based on how long it seems to allow participants. So we can have say like timeout is 30 seconds up to 2 minutes or something, and you can request that when you request your slot. The other idea I had is that we could be quite strict on when you arrive. So if you've registered in the queue and you're say like 5 seconds late or something, then you lose your slot, and someone else can, if they request a slot in the queue, they could immediately slot in that point. These are just some of the ideas I've had trying to minimize the effects of the sort of static queue.
Yeah, I thought we'd well, a couple of points there. There will be a lot of variation in the computation time, even with any particular implementation, because people have different number of threads in their machines. People have different. Some people will be running on a laptop, some on a powerful desktop, whatever. And just an update, I do have multi-threading running with Wasm. And I ran it on a desktop, which has a fairly recent processor on it, and 8 threads. And it got down to like 25 seconds, the computation time, which was not as great an improvement as I was expecting. Like on single threaded, it was just over a minute.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's going to be lots of variation. So I was thinking along the lines of the client checks in and then progressively checks in to assert that they're alive at increasing intervals towards the time that they're expected to run. And then the server kind of coordinates, or the coordinator tracks the progress and the number that are currently in the queue, and it can give a better estimation on each time they check in as to what time they're expected to run. And then when it's kind of 5 seconds out, it'll say, okay, are you alive? Yes, I am. Okay, let's go.
Okay, so that's an interesting idea. I think there's the philosophical difference between that approach and what I was thinking along the lines is, not to say one's more correct or whatever, just that. So you might, to understand correctly, your idea is to sort of have a queue that's where your position is important, like where you are in that queue, and then we keep updating the time, versus a thing where there's a fixed time that you're going to be participating in, which was more what I was proposing.
Yeah.
Huh. So your solution is definitely better from having a high throughput in terms of number of participants per time unit, at the cost of complexity. Mm.
Yeah, that's the trade-off.
So the thing I'm always trying to optimize for is like a person writing their own implementation here. And I worry that the timing requirements are a little bit difficult to get right if you're doing your own implementation, particularly if we don't have like a server you can test with to make sure that your timing is good.
Oh yeah, so I wouldn't be too precise on the timing. It's just like a deadline where if you don't check in by that time, you're assumed to be no longer alive, and it's going to be generous. Well, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah. Yeah, but the trouble is always this coordinator doesn't know they're alive unless there's some sort of active communication.
Yes.
So if you're just expecting them to show up at a given time, then a certain percentage will have shut down and left and just won't show up. So then you have to take some sort of corrective action to allow them time to show up, or else to just abandon and go on to the next person. But if that person's not expected to show up until a certain time slot, which will be later, then you're going to waste that time.
Yeah. I guess for you definitely waste that time. But like in terms of complexity of implementing this, it's a lot simpler. You don't have to worry about like a whole complicated timing mechanism. It's just wait until like you get a one time that you have to run it for, and you can just put an infinite for loop before an infinite loop before your code that just checks against whether the current time is like wall time is greater or less than your participation time, kind of thing. It's very simple versus having multiple times you need to check in at.
Oh, it's really just one loop that checks in, does a request, gets the next check-in time.
Okay. Yeah.
Sets up the timer for that time. And repeats.
Yeah. I guess that's all right.
It's a little more complex, yeah.
Yeah. No, agreed. All right. I'd be interested to see what your API looks like, and I think let's discuss it a bit then async. I hadn't thought about this approach, and maybe it's not as bad as as I think. But yeah, okay.
Just on a side note, Jeff, you briefly mentioned that you got 25 seconds. I think this is about twice of what I got on my laptop. So maybe we need to sort of have standard hardware specs so that the benchmarks can be normalized. I'm also wondering if how you did the multi-threading part. I used, I think, Comlink, a library. That might sort of be a reason for the variance as well.
Multi-threading. I used Rayon and just left it
Oh, I mean-
to decide what to do.
On the
Where does the COM
JavaScript
link
side,
come into it? JavaScript?
you're-
No, I wasn't pack, and it constructs the JavaScript for me.
oh, I believe there's another step. I remember doing another step where I had to install a library called comlink. Then I loaded the WASM code, and then it was multi-threaded. Or at least the web workers were being called efficiently, but it just didn't work in Safari.
Yeah, I found it didn't work in Mozilla. But it's definitely multi-threading. It just doesn't seem to be very efficient.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
yeah,
that's work in progress.
yeah.
We can work on that.
Yeah. I do still think maybe we need standard hardware specs in order to normalize the benchmarks. I don't know what those are, to be honest. Like the normal computer that will be contributing, like maybe 4 gigabytes 4 gigabytes RAM or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that sounds reasonable. I think like one of the problems is like RAM speeds vary a lot, and like just defining sort of RAM and CPU like doesn't normalize all that much unless we get very specific about exactly what combination we're using.
Yeah.
I mean, like if it helps, we can try set up a server somewhere that we use as our common test bench for these kinds of things, like some standard instance that we could try use.
Yeah, that would be probably good. Like some AWS instance that we can roughly get what the upper bound will be on the ceremony.
Okay. I can reach out to our DevOps team to see if we can organize something like that for us.
Yeah, sure. I could just figure out, if you just like tell me what the instance we should use, then I can do it on my end as well.
Yeah.
It'll probably be a medium.
Yeah, something like that.
All right.
Jeff, does that work for you as well?
Yeah, that'd be fine. But I think in the real world, we're going to have a lot of variations. Benchmarks are going to be, it's going to be a widespread from,
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think this is less to set an expectation of exactly how long it will take, but more just to have a common reference frame for talking about participation rates and that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. That sounds good. Do we want to jump to the next item on the agenda?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to ask Jeff is, you said there are a couple of people from PSC that would be helping you with the interface. At what point should they start coming to these calls, or should we start interfacing with them? Like getting the design ready, making sure it's plugging in correctly, stuff like that.
Oh yeah, well, I'm getting one guy starting in a week or so, but I really just want to start him off by I'll have a bunch of GitHub issues and we'll work on it together. So I don't know if they need to be on the call straight away, but down the track we'll get them involved.
Okay, so I'll just check in on that next week then. Or sorry, 2 weeks before the next call.
Yeah.
The next thing on the agenda is that I know the spec has been circulated to a small group of people, but Carl, do you want to give an update on like where it's at and what we need to do between now and the audit in September?
So I mean, there are a few things there. One is like like we needed to find this API, which Jeff was talking about, the one he's working on, and I'd like to get that then integrated into these specs, and now also include this SDK, and then yeah, the obviously between now and audit then is obviously implementations, which would be the big thing that needs to be done on top of that. The specs themselves, I mean, like it sort of just defines the computation that needs to be done, and I think that's fairly stable as to what needs to be done there. So like this can be shared and people can work on it or whatever. That's all good.
Got it. Yeah. You've probably done this with some people already, but is there anybody that you want to put it in front of that hasn't seen it yet, just to review it? Just thinking like it'd be better to do that, get that out, like check that box earlier rather than later, and then we can.
Yeah. Not thinking of anyone off the top of my head now, but I'll do some thinking and put on people's desks this week. That's a good idea.
Sure. Yeah, and then you mentioned the implementations, which is one of the next things. So for the audit, which implementation are we going to be focusing on? Will it be KEVs or a different one?
So the first audit is just targeted at the quote unquote computation. So it would be from what we're now calling the SDK, like sort of in and out of that SDK.
The first script, I thought the first one was related to the cryptography side of things.
Yeah, but that's basically this now.
Sigma prime was all the other bits that plug into it.
Yeah, but this SDK basically defines what happens at the quote unquote cryptography level.
Got it. Okay.
I mean, it sort of depends at where we are benchmark wise. I'm unsure as how to compare the stuff Kevin's been doing versus Jeff's thing, in part due to not having a common device we're testing on. And also like what checks are being performed when, etc. But I mean, the sort of foster of those two implementations would be the one I think we should reach out to audit.
Okay. Do we need to make a decision now on which implementation we use, or can they both be? I mean, I think it sounds like what we're working towards is something where any implementation can be swapped in. Is that true, or am I mistaken?
Yeah, that would be the idea.
Okay.
And then the benefit of that is A, we can swap it out if at runtime or whatever, if there are issues or preferences, and B, we can just choose whichever one is looking stronger at the time to audit at the first audits.
So I think mine and Jeff's implementation are essentially the same, apart from like a bit of JavaScript code, if I understood correctly. Just takes JavaScript code that calls the wasm part. We both sort of rely on the Rust library now.
Okay, well then I guess that's the one auditing then.
Okay, that's good to know. Anything else to add here about the implementations, Cav or Jeff?
No, sounds good.
All right. Has anybody been in touch with the SORCOM people about updating the library?
Haven't heard anything.
Yeah, I think last I heard was that they could do it. There was interest and maybe some availability, but I didn't have any idea of what their timelines are, and whether those match up with ours, and whether we need to put some resources on that specifically if they can't do it.
Yeah, and also now that the scope's a bit better defined, whether they're still interested.
Right.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on this, Carl or Kev?
I haven't heard from them, but I'm wondering if we do need them. I guess it doesn't seem like we currently need them. They're not blocking anything at the moment.
Yeah, I'm also agreeing with that.
So it's that we don't need it now, or that we won't need this library to be updated in the
That we
future?
won't need this library unless we're looking for a second crypto implementation.
Oh, okay. So that's good. We're reducing the scope of things we need to worry about.
Yeah.
I love it.
And if they do want to do it later, if they do decide this is something they want to get involved in, they can then quote unquote implement this SDK, and that would be fine.
Okay. And so what changed between 2 weeks ago and this week when we thought we needed to update this library and now we don't need it?
Before, I believe Jeff was connecting his front end to the Circom code, but now he connects to the Rust code.
Yeah, that's right. The Snap.js was working, was multi-threading. We could have run with that if we wanted to get going in 2 weeks or a month or something. But we've got a bit more time to play with, and we've got some good progress on the Rust side, so that's much less important that we have Snap.js as well.
Okay, that's great. And we already touched on the implementations.
I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
For the so I noticed the specs were using a Python code. Do we need the Python reference implementation?
I can add one if it helps, and I guess it would allow us to do things like differential fuzzing. So I can sort of implement the SDK in Python if it helps. But the specs being in Python are just sort of because that seems to be the way we do things these days, as in all the Ethereum consensus and execution specs are now being written in Python.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering. That makes sense then. And do we need a reference implementation? Or
so I guess that question is back on you. Would you like a reference implementation?
I was thinking about sort of it'd be quite nice, but then I thought that what if everyone just copies the reference implementation and doesn't look at the specs? So I don't know. I guess it'd be nice.
So the way we can do it is what we've done for the rest of the specs. The rest, like the consensus specs or whatever, is that the specs themselves are the reference implementation. So there's a script that sort of pulls out all the Python blobs and turns that into executable code.
Right.
And this is something that Mehdi asked about as well.
Yeah.
Whether it was executable. Is this like a nice to have, or something that we were looking to do already?
It's certainly a nice to have, and I wasn't exactly planning on doing it, mostly because I was feeling lazy at touching those terrifying scripts for turning the specs into executable stuff. But it sounds like it's something that people really would like, and it certainly would help and allow us to write test cases more easily and do differential fuzzing. So I'm more keen with that, particularly if we have an SDK defined that really allows us to have very nice interfaces. So sure, I will do that. I will make my specs executable.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Carl.
maybe it's not a top priority right now, I guess, but I was just wondering.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not uber top priority, but doing it now seems like a good idea. Fantastic. Let's do it.
Right, cool.
This does also mean if SOCOM wants to join the party later with an implementation, they could more easily compare to what we have, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, we've reached the end of the things I had on the list. Is there anything that we missed before I go into like what people are going to be working on for the next 2 weeks?
I have some topics I'd like to chat about if other people don't have anything they want to touch on first, because they might be easy to derail / extend discussions.
I guess the only thing I was going to mention, I sent it to you in chat, Carl, but generally I think it'd be better if we try to move more of these conversations you guys are probably having one-on-one into the public KZG-Ceremony chat, just so other people can, if they're catching up, after a month or so of checking out of this project, it'll be much easier for them to understand why decisions were made in certain ways. Obviously, not everything has to be public, but if you're trying to make a decision about something, think about putting it in the public channel. I think that would be helpful long-term for anybody not coming out of these calls regularly.
Agreed. I in particular haven't been good with that. I've been trying to, as of yesterday, improve that a little bit. So like I've opened issues on my specs repo for discussions, kind of things on APIs, or the point I was raising earlier on optimistic contributions, etc., etc. So yeah, between the chat and hopefully issues, we should have a better history of this, and agreed it's something that I'd like to do.
Awesome. Yeah, and then I guess really quick before we jump into what you were going to talk about is just, let's get just a quick 1 or 2 sentence summary of what people are going to be working on the next 2 weeks. Kev, if you want to start.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was sort of related to what you just said. I was reading the specs and I thought that it would be good to have I think Carl mentioned it last time he was there, another repo which holds all the rationale, while the specs repo mainly is just for implementers on how to implement it. Some of the stuff I think might not be intuitive as to why we're doing certain things. So I was looking to sort of copy some stuff over from the notes into this new repo, or if it's not been made already.
Okay, cool.
If Carl, did you have any thoughts on that, whether we need?
I was thinking not doing it in a separate repo and having it be sort of attached hackmd/notes.ethereum notes. And if it's more explaining how to implement things or whatever, then we can actually include it in the repo itself. I'm fine with that as long as it's in a separate section. Yeah, no, actually, I think I'd prefer to do it that way. Otherwise, I think it's a little bit hard to track across multiple repos exactly what's happening.
Yeah, sure. So just put it in a hackmd for the rationale.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on what level it is. If it's like this is why we made these decisions, then it should be in the hackmd. But if it's this is why you might want to implement it this way, then I think it should be just in the specs themselves.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I was more thinking the latter, as in this is why you need to do this check and stuff like that. Yeah.
I think we should just include those in the specs themselves.
Okay. Cool.
It'll be slightly less elegant. We'll have a little bit of extra files lying around, but I just think it's easier than having multiple repos, and
right.
that a hackmd, it might be a bit complicated for that.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah. And we can always change this decision further down the line.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I'll be looking into doing that. It mainly will just be like a copy and paste and refactoring stuff I did in the notes that initially was there.
Yeah.
Got it. Carl?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'm going to be working on defining that SDK and trying to make the specs implementable, and also reviewing / commenting / trying to make final decisions on the API, which Jeff said he'd be sharing.
Cool.
Yep. And yeah, so I'll continue on those specs. I'll announce a URL where people can find them as I'm working on them. And yeah, there's quite a bit of work to be done on those specs, and I'll get together some a list of tasks to start implementing the APIs.
Okay. How are people feeling generally with the timeline and where we need to get to? I mean, it's mid-July. Crypto, the audit is scheduled for, oh, did I read this wrong? Is it August or September? Oh, looks like mid-August.
Yeah, that's when you have the SegWit booking.
Right. Are we still on track for that? Like, are we gonna have a crunch time in the last 2 weeks? How do people feel?
It all feels pretty comfortable to me.
Okay, that's good.
I think I'd be a bit more comfortable if we had something like what Marius had, to something doing the ceremony very quickly and then sort of refactoring that. Just have everything up. So I don't know. I'm sort of in the middle. Like if we have a ceremony running with what we like, just a ceremony running that we can tear down and keep pulling up to refactor stuff. The mid-August would be quite nice.
Yeah, good point, Kev. I can actually release my my test site so that people can play with it, and that'd be good too, because we'd see what sort of variation.
Yeah.
we get.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, note for audit things here. That's the first implementation is just of the crypto side of things. So SDK to input to SDK output.
Right.
Right.
So it's like the work that needs to be done on this front is sort of limited to mostly now defining this interface and Kev's stuff there.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Because I just wasn't comfortable assuming we'd have a robust enough like end-to-end implementation for these first audits, but maybe I'm wrong in that.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because then the sort of audit to the full system would be based on discussions with Sigma Prime yesterday. Yeah, the audit to the full system would be at the end of October.
Right, I was gonna bring that up. They had actually offered that they had a slot open up in September, but Carl doesn't feel like we'll be ready for that in time. But yeah, there was a chance that we may have been able to move it up to mid-September.
Right. Yeah, I think that was a good decision.
I think had we given them something, then it wouldn't have been complete. So it would have been like, try audit this, but there are 1 or 2 things we're still trying to fix. And like some of the feedback they would have given us would have been obvious feedback because we were aware of these weaker points, whereas now we can have a more solid code base we present to them.
Right.
Right.
The other thing which came to mind while we were talking is, should we maybe in the next 2 weeks or the 2 weeks to follow that, organize somebody else to come in and do like a check-in, like Danny or Dankrad or somebody who can just who hasn't been engaged in this so far, just to check in on the progress, and maybe we do a bit of a presentation to them. Would that be useful, or is it just creating unnecessary work? I guess I'm pretty far outside of the development side of things, so would be curious what you guys think about if this would be helpful or not. See if we're missing anything, things like that.
I think it would be helpful at some time. I don't know if the next 2 weeks would be the perfect time for it to, so yeah, I think it would be definitely really helpful to do it at some time, but I don't know sort of if the next 2 weeks will be the perfect time for it.
Yeah, I share those opinions.
Okay. So then I guess the next thing to prepare for is just the getting ready for that audit in August. Okay, yeah, that's it for me. Carl, you had some topics. Sorry, I took up took up most of those last 10 minutes.
No, all good. Is everyone fine to chat a little bit to run over time a little bit to discuss these topics? If not, just drop out. That's fine. So one of the things I was wanting to talk about was my optimistic contribution idea. So basically save the subgroup checks till after you've already returned the file to the coordinator, as a means of speeding things up. I mean, it doesn't change anything from like a security standpoint, but it might change things from an optics standpoint. I don't know if anyone has read that idea / had any thoughts on that, or would like me to explain it.
Yeah, so yeah, it's going to speed things up on the client side, but the coordinator is always going to be passing on the last validate. It's going to do its own validation and only accepting, yeah, only the valid contributions will be in the chain, right?
Yes. So this doesn't change anything for the coordinator. There's the attack Kobe presented was basically using a low order group element to basically extract some information about the secret. And to check this, we either need to do subgroup checks or a pairing check with some extra assumptions on the pairing. But this just adds computation time. So if we remove those checks or do those checks after the fact, then this basically means that the participant could be tricked by the coordinator into leaking some small amount of information about their secret, assuming that the coordinator pulls off this malicious attack with low order elements, which we don't know.
Yeah. And can we assume that it's going to be quite rare?
Well, it should never fail this test ever. So as far to my understanding, we don't know any low order elements for BLS or for this curve. And so assuming that's true, it's not even possible. And even if it is, it would require a malicious coordinator. So to me, it's this check is more just about showing we're doing the right thing than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's on the assumption that you have a honest coordinator. The worst case for skipping the checks like these is just that a few bits of the secret key is leaked. In that worst case, if it ever happens, I guess the person could retry or.
Yeah, so my idea here is that you don't attest to this being your contribution. So you still perform those checks, you just do it after you've returned the updated transcript to the coordinator. And then yes,
Right.
you would re-participate at a later date / shout about it or whatever. But as I say, I don't even think it's possible to do this because we don't know any low order elements for BLS, and requires a malicious coordinator.
Mm, hmm. Right, I'd have to double check the BLS part about the low order points. But yeah, the malicious coordinator. Yeah, if we can assume that the coordinators will just be by Ethereum, then is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, so it's going to be run by sort of trusted community members because the coordinator always has the ability to censor you. So there's some level of trust here anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a good idea then. Just do it after.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think what you said is a good idea. So you only attest if the subgroup checks pass. So you optimistically assume everything is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Then you can sort of do the full subgroup check because it doesn't hold up the ceremony.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, as you say, not entirely sure about my claims about low order BLS stuff. I'm also not entirely convinced. I've asked around and people seem to think this is the case, but no one's, yeah. But yes, I'll operate under the assumption that this is a good idea for now and implement that because obviously affects the SDK.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. We should probably put in the rationale if there are low order points, how many bits are actually leaked to the coordinator, just in case. But if it's what you said, there are no actual low order points, then yeah, we could just remove it altogether.
I mean, my understanding is there are no known ones, but I think we should perform the checks anyway, certainly from an optics standpoint. And in case, like, what happens if 5 years down the line we do find something? Now, do we trust it or whatever? And then the second thing is, off the top of my head, I think it's 2.2 bits. That could be leaked. I'm not entirely sure on that.
Right. So the group order would be it'd be roughly two times.
Yeah.
Like it's even. The group order is basically even, 2 times some prime number, I guess.
Yeah. I must double check. It's in my head. It's roughly 2.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So I mean, like even then, it's not a dramatic issue. But yes, this should all go in the rationale. This is exactly the kind of thing we should be explaining.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Even if, I mean, as long as it's like less than, I guess, 8, this is the worst case, then it should be fine. I mean, if it just leaks the whole private key, then that would be a really bad situation. I know that's not the case. Yeah.
Turns out the subgroup is minute. I can count the elements on one hand.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. This will probably speed up a lot of things as well. Yeah.
Okay, I'm liking this. I'll then implement that. And then the other thing I was wanting to check. So one of the ideas I had was I was worried about the file getting too large after some of the discussions we had with Marius doing some back the envelope calculations last week. But I'm no longer convinced that's the case. So I was going to propose having a sort of truncated transcript where you don't receive all of the sort of intermediate numbers. We don't send all the intermediate pub keys, as I've been calling them, through to the participants. But if we assume, say, 100,000 participants, then the file is 22 megs large, which I don't think is unreasonable.
So I don't actually understand why we need to send the intermediate Oh wait, sorry. We need to send the pub keys of every. Are you saying we need to send the pub keys of everybody who's participated?
So I was going to propose not doing that because we do
Right.
currently. But then my thought is like, is it worth the effort? So like just the piles of tile sort of comes up to 7.5 megs.
Right.
And then like if we have, say, as I say, 100,000 participants, we'll never have 100,000 participants. But if we do, that's then a 22 meg file. So the delta there is not too large. If we have 10,000 participants, which I'd be ecstatic if we reached, then the file's 9 megs. So you picked up 1.5 megs of sort of fluff. And I'm not sure it's worth sort of making the distinction between
Right.
truncated and non-truncated versions of it.
Yeah, I was also under the assumption that you don't need to send those because as a participant, you receive some SRS, you contribute to it, you give your witness, and then you don't really care about the previous contributions. You can check that sort of after the fact, assuming that the ceremony, the coordinators trusted. So like you just need to make sure that the thing you're contributing to something valid.
Yeah.
A valid SRS. Yeah. So yeah, in that case, we wouldn't need to send the previous pub keys.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So then, yeah.
So I mean, I'm agreeing with that statement. It's not necessary, but like, if for 10,000 participants the overhead is 10%, then like, is it worth like making that distinction? It also means that like it would be easier to verify that that you're in, like other people have been included before you, whatever, based on the transcript you receive at the time.
But then couldn't the coordinator just send you a bunch of random pub keys and then say, you know, these are different people who have participated?
Yeah, that's always possible. Yeah. Okay,
So,
agree. It doesn't add anything.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Okay. Jeff, do you have any thoughts on sort of an extra overhead of say 1.5 megs to the file on top of the 7.5 meg file?
Yeah, I think you're right. It doesn't make any significant difference.
Okay. Like if that, I agree. If the file was massive, then absolutely. But for this amount, I don't think it's worth it. Okay, then one of the other ideas I've been having is, and I'm not sure about it, is so what if so if you're testing to something that's basically saying that you think this is your contribution, but multiple people could claim the same contribution, which could potentially like cast doubt on things. So we could sort of do the inverse and have the contribution sign some of your own information. So like we use the secret to create a BLS signature over some message that you want, which could be your Ethereum address or whatever. And so then in the transcript would be a reverse link. Do people think this would be a worthwhile thing to have?
So the problem that's being solved is if I contribute and then you sort of say that my contribution was yours. So now
Yes.
two people are claiming.
So it's a bit of a weird one because like if like someone else who didn't participate is looking at the list of contributors and they trust like Kevin, then like that should be it. It doesn't matter if someone else claimed they to have participated.
Right. Right. No,
but
yeah.
it does allow for another weird case, which is where like you could pretend to be someone else. So you could like the message you sign in the transcript could be like Vitalik.eth, and now that appears multiple times and like it creates some confusion there. It's like it doesn't add anything, but the reverse link does allow like if both links exist, then we could have like an extra verified tick or something like that.
Right. I think Vitalik asked this question before somewhere, and the idea was that sort of if someone's lying, then you can't really trust them to even have participated correctly in the first place.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I feel like it might add extra complexity without any extra security being added. But I'd like to see what sort of Vitalik and Dankrad think about that.
Okay. I will sort of re-raise that with them, and we can get some input from them.
I do, but if I remember correctly, I think a lot of other previous trusted ceremonies did include a signature. I remember somewhere that there's been places where we added a signature. Like what
Was
you're
that
suggesting.
okay? Like what I suggested, I've seen lots of like a quote unquote back, like with just the forward link, but not sort of the what I'm calling the backlink, the ceremony pointing at you.
All right. Okay. Yeah. I don't think I've seen that actually. Now that you clarified. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd probably raise it with Vitalik and Dankrad. I don't have any sort of strong opinions. It just seems like it might not add any extra security, but
It definitely doesn't add any extra security, but does sort of allow us to be very sure on who participated where.
Right. Unless, like what you said, they sort of put in "I'm Vitalik." Everyone just says "I'm Vitalik."
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Like it doesn't change. Like in that case, they're still just malicious participants, or dishonest participants, which doesn't change the security assumption, but might change the optics on. Oh, now one person's participated multiple times. Like, do they have all the keys, kind of thing?
Right. So I don't know if it changes the security, because maybe I participate properly and then I put in like a random input, but then I just start trolling people and say, I'm Vitalik, so I'm still,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, I'll write it up properly and as a GitHub issue and get people to contribute.
Right. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's all that I wanted to discuss. Yeah.
All right, I think we can wrap up. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Okay, thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Talk in 2 weeks. Bye.
Yeah. Chat soon. Bye.
Bye.